Hi, welcome to the conclusion of Chapter 1 of Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. We are going to take a look at the chapter questions. First of all, the vocabulary. Remind you that we've already read 2 and 3, so those page numbers were in the previous videos. You should have gotten the definitions either from me or from looking them up. Today we will read indignation twice. So you'll have 2 different page numbers that you can put down. Make sure you get the definition. Part 2, the comprehension check. You need to answer all of the following questions, and wherever you complete them, be sure to use complete sentences and include specific text details in your answer. Remember, you need to restate and answer the question in your topic sentence. You must cite, include text details, and make sure that you explain them. We have already covered completely numbers 1 through 3 in the 2 previous lessons. We have most of the information for number 4. What is the condition of the books the children were to receive? We are going to continue reading about the condition of the books, and we'll see that more clearly as we begin this part of the chapter. Question 5, analyze why little man reacted the way he did to the book. Now, we read a little bit of that. We know that he went up to get his book, and we know little man, meticulous little man. He wants everything perfect and neat and clean. And he sees his book that is clearly, like mine has, it's been bent, somebody else has used it. It's clear that on the sides of the book that someone has used it. His is even more marked up than this book. This is only maybe 2 years old. He asks for a new book, and his reasoning is, it's dirty. The teacher is appalled. How dare he ask for a book, a different book? They're lucky enough to even have books. The Black School has never been given books before, and the county has finally given them books. He should take what he's given, is what the teacher believes. There is more to little man's reaction. We're going to pick up right in the middle of that when we start to read. The second part of that question is to also analyze Cassie's reaction to the book. We have not read that yet. The only thing we've seen is that when little man is deciding whether or not to take the book, he notices that all the books are dirty. And he looks to Cassie and she nods and says, not says, but when she nods, he knows he should take it. That's not truly her reaction. There's a bigger reaction coming up. Analyze means that you need to think about why they act the way that they do and explain what you think their reasoning is for doing what they've done. Okay. The third part here is to complete the analyzing character worksheet, which should be copied on the back of this worksheet for you. And you can use both chapters 1 and 2. So the questions in the vocabulary are due when we've decided in class. The analyzing character worksheet is due at a separate time after chapter 2. All right, so let's turn to our books, and we left off on page 24. So remember, little man has just returned to his desk with his new book. I watched little man as he scooted into his seat beside 2 other little boys. He sat for a while with a stony face looking out the window. Then, evidently accepting the fact that the book in front of him was the best that he could expect, he turned and opened it. But as he stared at the book's inside cover, his face clouded, changing from sulky acceptance to puzzlement. His brows furrowed. Then his eyes grew wide, and suddenly he sucked in his breath and sprang from his chair like a wounded animal, flinging the book onto the floor and stomping madly on it. There's his reaction. Miss Crocker rushed to little man and grabbed him up in powerful hands. She shook him vigorously, then set him on the floor again. Now what's gotten into you, Clayton Chester? Little man said nothing. He just stood staring down at the open book, shivering with indignant anger. So there we go, indignant, on page 24. And actually, the word anger is kind of in the definition. To be indignant, it means that you are angrily aroused by something unjust or unfair. So something in that book he recognizes is not right. And we'll see it in a minute. Pick it up, she ordered. No, defied little man. No, I'll give you 10 seconds to pick up that book, boy, or I'm going to get my switch. Little man bit his lower lip, and I knew that he was not going to pick up the book. Rapidly, I turned to the inside cover of my own book and saw immediately what had made little man so furious. Stamped on the inside cover was a chart which read, so take a look at this chart with me. Okay, we often have a chart stamped in the inside of our textbooks as well. It's something similar. So you see at the top, property of the Board of Education, Spokane County, Mississippi. In the South, their districts are done by county. It starts September 1922. We already know, I've indicated this takes place during the Great Depression, so this is in the 30s. Chronological, we have the order that they're given out in issuance, numbers 1 through 12. They will be number 12, the 12th children to have this book. Date of issuance starting September 1922, going down to September 1933. This is going to be Cassie and Little Man's book, 1933. Condition of the book, you see it starts as new, excellent, then very good, good, average, poor, and once it becomes poor, they're receiving the book that is very poor. But that's not the biggest thing for us to note here. We already know the books were in poor condition. They note the race of the student. White, 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 all the way until number 12. And then the word that is there, Negra. We know nowadays that it is not appropriate to use that word. At that time period, it was more commonly accepted, but it was still offensive. Let's take a look. Page 26. The blank lines continued down to line 20, and I knew that they had all been reserved for Black students. A knot of anger swelled in my throat and held there. But as Miss Crocker directed little man to bend over for the whipping chair, I put aside my anger and jumped up. Miss Crocker, don't, please, I cried. Miss Crocker's dark eyes warned me not to say another word. I know why he done it. You want part of this switch, Cassie? No, I said hastily. I just want to tell you how come little man done what he done. Sit down, she ordered, as I hurried toward her with the open book in my hand. Holding the book up to her, I said, see, Miss Crocker? See what it says? They give us these old books when they didn't want them no more. She regarded me impatiently, but did not look at the book. Now, how could he know what it says? He can't read. Yes'm, he can. He been reading since he was 4. He can't read all them big words, but he can read them columns. See what's in the last row? Please look, Miss Crocker. This time, Miss Crocker did look, but her face did not change. Then, holding up her head, she gazed unblinkingly down at me. See what they called us? I said, afraid she had not seen. That's what you are, she said coldly. Now go sit down. I shook my head, realizing now that Miss Crocker did not even know what I was talking about. She had looked at the page and had understood nothing. I said, sit down, Cassie. I started slowly toward my desk, but as the hickory stick sliced the tense air, I turned back around. Ms. Crocker, I said, I don't want my book neither. The switch landed hard upon little man's upturned bottom. Miss Crocker looked questioningly at me as I reached up to her desk and placed the book upon it. Then she swung the switch 5 more times, and discovering that little man had no intention of crying, ordered him up. All right, Cassie, she sighed, turning to me. Come on and get yours. By the end of the school day, I had decided that I would tell Mama everything before Miss Crocker had a chance to do so. From 9 years of trial and error, I had learned that punishment was always less severe when I poured out the whole truth to Mama on my own before she had heard anything from anyone else. I knew that Miss Crocker had not spoken to Mama during the lunch period, for she had spent the whole hour in the classroom preparing for the afternoon session. As soon as class was dismissed, I sped from the room, weaving a path through throngs of students happy to be free. But before I could reach the 7th grade class building, I had the misfortune to collide with Mary Lou's father. Mr. Welliver looked down on me with surprise that I would actually bump into him, then proceeded to lecture me on the virtues of watching where one was going. Meanwhile, Miss Crocker briskly crossed the lawn to Mama's class building. By the time I escaped Mr. Welliver, she had already disappeared into the darkness of the hallway. Mama's classroom was in the back. I crept silently along the quiet hall and peeped cautiously into the open doorway. Mama, pushing a strand of her long, crinkly black hair into a chignon, which is basically like a bun, kind of how my hair is today, at the base of her slender neck, was seated at her desk watching Miss Crocker thrust a book before her. "Just look at that, Mary," Miss Crocker said, thumping the book twice with her forefinger. "A perfectly good book ruined. Look at that broken binding and those footmarks all over it." Mama did not speak as she studied the book. "And here's the one Cassie wouldn't take," she said, placing a second book on Mama's desk with an outraged slam. "At least she didn't have a tantrum and stomp all over hers. I tell you, Mary, I just don't know what got into those children today. I always knew Cassie was rather high-strung, but little man, he's always such a perfect little gentleman." Mama glanced at the book I had rejected and opened the front cover so that the offensive pages of both books faced her. "You say Cassie said it was because of this front page that she and little man didn't want the books?" Mama asked quietly. "Yes, ain't that something?" Miss Crocker said, forgetting her teacher training school diction in her indignation. There's the second time. So indignation is also on page 29. So she is also angry and thinks that something is unfair as well. She thinks the books are okay. There's nothing wrong with them. How dare the children not accept them when they're being given something that was meant to be a gift? The very idea. That's on all the books. And why they got so upset about it, I'll never know. "You punished them?" asked Mama, glancing up at Miss Crocker. "Well, I certainly did. Whipped both of them good with my hickory stick. Wouldn't you have?" When Mama did not reply, she added defensively, "I had a perfect right to." "Of course you did, Daisy," Mama said, turning back to the books. "They disobeyed you." But her tone was so quiet and non-committal that I knew Miss Crocker was not satisfied with her reaction. "Well, I thought you would have wanted to know, Mary, in case you wanted to give them a piece of your mind also." Mama smiled up at Miss Crocker and said rather absently, "Yes, of course, Daisy, thank you." Then she opened her desk drawer and pulled out some paper, a pair of scissors, and a small brown bottle. Miss Crocker, dismayed by Mama's seeming unconcern for the seriousness of the matter, thrust her shoulders back and began moving away from the desk. "You understand that if they don't have those books to study from, I'll have to fail them in both reading and composition? Since I plan to base all my lessons around—" She stopped abruptly and stared in amazement at Mama. "Mary, what in the world are you doing?" Mama did not answer. She had trimmed the paper to the size of the books and was now dipping a gray-looking glue from the brown bottle onto the inside cover of one of the books. Then she took the paper and placed it over the glue. "Mary Logan, do you know what you're doing? That book belongs to the county. If somebody from the superintendent's office ever comes down here and sees that book, you'll be in real trouble." Mama laughed and picked up the other book. In the first place, no one cares enough to come down here. And in the second place, if anyone should come, maybe he could see all the things we need. Current books for all of our subjects, not just somebody's old throwaways, desks, paper, blackboards, erasers, maps, chalk. Her voice trailed off as she glued the second book. Biting the hand that feeds you. That's what you're doing, Mary Logan, biting the hand that feeds you. Again, Mama laughed. If that's the case, Daisy, I don't think I need that little bit of food. With the second book finished, she stared at a small pile of 7th grade books on her desk. Well, I just think you're spoiling those children, Mary. They've got to learn how some things are sometimes. Maybe so, said Mama, but that doesn't mean they have to accept them. And maybe we don't either. Miss Crocker gazed suspiciously at Mama. Although Mama had been a teacher at Great Faith for 14 years, ever since she had graduated from the Crandon Teacher Training School at 19, she was still considered by many of the other teachers as a disrupting maverick. Her ideas were always a bit too radical and her statements a bit too pointed. The fact that she had not grown up in Spokane County, but in the Delta, made her even more suspect. And the more traditional thinkers like Miss Crocker were wary of her. Well, if anyone ever does come from the county and sees Cassie and Little Man's books messed up like that, she said, I certainly won't accept the responsibility for them. It will be easy enough for anyone to see whose responsibility it is, Daisy, by opening any 7th grade book. Because tomorrow, I'm going to mess them up too. Miss Crocker, finding nothing else to say, turned imperiously and headed for the door. I dashed across the hall and awaited her exit, then crept back. Mama remained at her desk, sitting very still. For a long time, she did not move. When she did, she picked up one of the 7th grade books and began to glue again. I wanted to go and help her, but something warned me that now was not the time to make my presence known, and I left. I would wait until the evening to talk to her. There was no rush now. She understood. And that is the end of chapter 1. So remember, I'm asking that you finish parts 1 and 2 and turn that in on the day that we've discussed in class, and then also to start working on the character paper. So on the back side, I've already written Cassie's name, but you need to go back to your interactive notes where we created that little flip book that has character traits. And looking through those, try to pick out at least four character traits that describe Cassie. And perhaps in this chapter, you're only able to find 2, and you'll continue as we read in chapter 2. From there, though, you also need to find text details, specific quotes, the exact words from the book that are going to display that character trait. We'll talk more about that in class. All right, we'll see you next time.